Can a talking shell find happiness in this cold, cruel world? The film Marcel the Shell with Shoes On tries to answer that question, and we're going to see how well it does on this episode of the Hour of the Wolf Reviews. Welcome to the Hour of the Wolf Reviews. I'm Dan Persons. This is an offshoot of the long-running radio show Hour of the Wolf, which airs on WBAI 99.5 FM in New York and is hosted by Jim Freund. What we're doing here is taking the film and TV reviews I do for that show, and since there's never enough time to delve into the topic as much as I wish, we elaborate, dig a little deeper here, and hopefully get a better appreciation for the film or TV show at hand. So first thing, I'm going to play you the review for Marcel the Shell with Shoes On as it aired on Hot Wolf, and then I'm going to come back and expand on that review a bit. So here we go. Here's the original review. Hour of the Wolf Review. Air date October 10th, 2022. Marcel the Shell with Shoes On. Take one. I'm Dan Persons, and this is my Hour of the Wolf Review. Okay, Jim, this is on you. I said I was deciding on either the Spanish horror film Piggy or Marcel the Shell with Shoes On for this week's review, and you said, do Marcel the Shell. So thanks to you, I wound up crying over the fate of a stop-motion animated shell. I hope you're proud of yourself. I wasn't quite prepared to be that moved by a ragged mockumentary about an unassuming, tiny little shell with one googly craft store eye, and yes, a pair of shoes underneath, but there you go. The film is based on a series of ragged YouTube videos, and is also a kind of elaboration on the phenomenal popularity of those videos, with Marcel, who's performed by prodigious voice actor Jenny Slate, and amateur filmmaker Dean, played by Dean Fleischer Camp, who also directed and co-wrote, using the shell's viral fame to help him find his involuntarily relocated family. It's a hard thing to portray innocence on the screen. Too often it can come out cloying or gratingly artificial, or with the creators involuntarily exposing their own cynicism. But between the rough charm of the stop-motion animation and the loose approach to the narrative, the film frequently jumps around to various activities Marcel uses to amuse himself, and Jenny Slate's engaging yet wry vulnerability as Marcel. The shell may be naive, but not a fool. You become fully invested in the character. When the plot kicks in, which includes Marcel seeking support from his grandmother, also a shell and voiced wonderfully by Isabella Rossellini. I don't know if the two actors recorded together, but it sure sounds like they did. And a guest appearance by 60 Minutes reporter Leslie Stahl, you're legitimately pulling for the shell's success in orchestrating a family reunion. In some ways, Marcel the Shell with Shoes On falls into that category of brainier kids' fables with the likes of Charlotte's Web or Stuart Little, but with a bit more of a surreal twist to it. It's weird and weirdly engaging and a delight. For Hour of the Wolf, I'm Dan Persons. And that was the review as aired, but hold on, I've got some more thoughts, and we'll get to those right after this break. Quick observation. As I noted in that review, towards the end of the film we see a 60 Minutes report by Leslie Stahl on Marcel. And I don't know if they recruited any 60 Minutes writers to do the sequence, but Stahl's intro is strikingly accurate to the way such a story would actually be introduced on 60 Minutes. It's cute, but every time I watch 60 Minutes now, I'm going to go, Anyway, let's move on. Common wisdom says that film, and by extension TV, is a passive medium. We sit there and let the imagery wash over us, absorbing it like ambulatory sponges. It's understandable to think of it that way. It's not completely apt. I was sitting watching Marcel the Shell with shoes on and tearing up. Aside from the finale, there's also a sequence with Marcel's grandmother that struck me right in the gut. And I was wondering why this was affecting me so profoundly. These are little animated shells. I can't call them crudely animated because they adapt the look of crudeness, but it's actually very sophisticated the way they're integrated into the live-action settings. And you never lose sight of the fact that they're unreal animated characters, but they hold you as compellingly as any live-action character would. And I think it's actually that unreality that paradoxically makes them real. That's actually a notion that's going around as a slap at computer-generated imagery. The thread of it is that CG is too real, that it loses the magic of knowing that a spaceship or a monster has been handcrafted and painstakingly manipulated on screen. Here again, I don't think that's completely true. Andor has sequences where the characters are watching TIE fighters flying around in the distance, and the imagery has an eerie verisimilitude that makes you feel as if it all was shot on location. But yes, there's something special about the artistry of physical effects. But I don't think all the magic is in the hands of the effects artists themselves. In the very early days of film, the tendency was to shoot the action in long shots, showing the actors' full bodies at all times. It made a kind of sense. The movie screen was like an artificial proscenium, so you styled your film like it was a short little play. Those films have charm, but are not terribly involving. Comes D.W. Griffith and Sergei Eisenstein and the incorporation of close-ups and intercutting and all of that, and now film becomes alive. It becomes engaging. And the thing about that is that it became realer because it wasn't real. Sitting in a movie theater and pretending you're looking at actors up on a stage is real. Everything that's done to get you involved in a film is artificial, and that's the point. Watching a film, your brain is put on alert. Hey, something is happening here, and you're paying attention. You're not a sponge. You're working with the filmmaker, activating your mind to follow along with what the storyteller is doing. It is said that radio, back in the days of Little Orphan Annie and Jack Armstrong, the All-American Boy, was the theater of the mind. In actuality, all storytelling, all art maybe, if done well, is the theater of the mind. You become a component part of the story, much more active than even you know. And it's the same thing with special effects. You create something that appears photorealistic, as CG artists tend to do, and it's just up there on the screen, a part of reality. Work flaws and imperfections into the process, like, say, animating a tiny shell with tiny shoes every other frame, so the motion is just a little choppy. And pattern-forming creatures that we are, we're paying attention, filling in the gaps, giving the breath of life, even as we perceive that life isn't really there. That's only half the battle, though. The other half is the characters you create and the stories you tell, and how the voice performances, like the striking openness that Jenny Slate brings to Marcel, convince you that what you're watching is more than a physical prop being manipulated by unseen hands. It's the abstraction of Marcel the Shell with shoes on that engages us, and it's the heart-touching story that Dean Fleischer Camp tells that makes us care. Thank you for listening. Remember, if you love science fiction, fantasy, and enchantment, you should be listening to Hour of the Wolf. every Monday at 9 p.m. at WBAI 99.5 FM in New York. And if you're not in the tri-state area, you can live stream through TuneIn or on WBAI.org. And there's an archive on the WBAI website as well. If you want to comment about anything, you can write me at hotwolfreviews@upstartcompany.com. And you can follow this show on Facebook at The Hour of the Wolf Reviews, or you can follow me on Twitter at Dan Persons. I am Dan Persons, host and producer. The show was recorded at the studios of the Kindness Institute Consortium. The theme music is by Johnny Holiday, licensed through Creative Commons. This has been an Upstart Company production. Enjoy your week.